talking about weight, I just wanted to make a complaint to the WPT. I've brought something with me that's quite heavy. I just wanted to. I had this in my bag just from the other day. Why are these so heavy? I have a. Speaking of weight, because this is basically added about 30% to my body weight. I'm just going to put this here on the table. I have nowhere else to put it, but right in the shot. Sorry, Danny.
No, that's okay.
Just going to leave that there. So tell me, why are these so heavy?
That's the question for Martin.
So I guess because I'm not media and I don't want to be media, I thought I'd start this with a statement rather than a question.
All right.
And my statement is thank you. I want to say thank you for all your hard work over, I've been playing for 14 years and you've been around since my inception. But I've seen the hard work and the long hours and the long tournament series, the traveling, you really put a lot into this game, and I want to thank you for that. So,
I appreciate it too. Thank you, and it is great. Occasionally, players do come up, and it's really good. It makes it worth the work when people say that. So, thanks very much.
Yeah, no, look, it's I speak on behalf of everyone in the poker community because I think we come in and we play, and we don't really give credit where credit's due for the fact that we have the game to be able to play. People just take that for granted when you're a poker player. So, yeah, it's cool having you on here, and I want to get a bit of your story, get out there. I know a little bit about it, but I'm sure I'll learn a lot more by the end of this.
Okay.
But, yeah, look, tell us what it's like to be a tournament director, and you were at PokerStars, and now you're at WPT. You've traveled. Tell us.
Yeah, well, it goes back to 1997, actually. So I was originally a baccarat dealer, roulette dealer, and blackjack dealer. That was my third game at Crown. Then they advertised for poker. So this was about 2 years in 1996. So joined a school. We actually learned how to dealt. So I was one of the supervisors, original supervisors, but we learned how to dealt, which was really good. So the early days of Crown, occasionally I'd even jump on a table. And I think that was a massive difference over just learning it and not dealing the game. So I think June 30, 1997 was the first day for the poker room in Crown, and it was about 14 tables, I think, at that stage, and it was a complete different experience. So I didn't know anything about poker before I sort of applied for it, and then within about 3 months, the position of tournament director came up, which was basically just the Sunday tournament, and then we added a Thursday tournament, I think, so twice a week. And then we worked towards the first Australasian Championship in July 1998, which ended up being the Aussie Millions in the long run. So it goes back 25 years. So the initial poker. So I think I always enjoyed maths, as in number maths, not scientific type maths. So that's always helped with running tournaments, because I can do a lot of the stuff in my head, sort of working out chips or structures and the like. And then what was I? I did accounting at university, and I was in banking before I joined the casino. So I guess I was always involved with money, and so the tournaments come along, and from there it just went on to the Aussie Millions, then went on to PokerStars, and then moving to Macau and the base of Macau. So Macau became the real hotspot in Asia. APBT, ANZBT I really enjoyed as a tournament director, because it was about experience besides going to the event, and lots of the Australian guys and Kiwi guys. There were some great stops like Darwin, Perth, Queenstown stands out and the like. Took a year off, end of March 2016, and for the rest of the year ended up in Vegas. Played a little bit of poker. I played limit hold'em, so I'm not a no-limit player, that's for sure. And then Angelica, who's the VP of Global Tour Management, I know her from Crown Days. So she got in touch and said, what do you think about, we want to try and have an event in Macau. So that's how I got into WPT. So no event yet in Macau, but we've had some other successes. And then, and of course, here in Australia's capped it off, that's for sure, this last event.
Yeah. This last event in Sydney has been an absolute, it was a record-breaking event, right?
Yeah.
So congratulations on that. I know that's a great achievement for you and your team. So, but yeah, look, that's obviously a snapshot of your very long and fruitful career, and I'm sure, you got many stories that go along with it. It's fascinating looking at that. You mentioned 1997. I just want to let you know I was 7 years old when you began. So, for me, like, I feel like, wow, that's like a lifetime you've really like been in this game and really served this game from many different angles. How does it feel to like reflect on that from the inception of your story to like where you are now?
It's interesting. I think it's only when COVID came along that you start to think, oh, gee, I've been doing that for a while, and then coming out of COVID and then looking back over all the events and the times and the different places, living in different places too. So Melbourne, I left Melbourne after leaving Crown, up in Sydney for a couple of years, and then when I joined PokerStars, and then on to Macau, 2008, 8 years there, 3 years in Philippines, and 18 months on the road, sort of during COVID, so waiting for Philippines to open up and Australia to open up.
So COVID really gave you that reflection of, looking back, I suppose you had your lockdown like all of us did, and in that time a lot of us are looking back on our lives and thinking, what are we doing? What is life about? It's really challenged us from almost the spiritual, philosophical level of what we're doing, right? But for you, it's kind of maybe giving you that break because you're a go man. Yes. I don't think I've ever seen you sit still. I mean, and I've trapped you here for the next 30 or 40 minutes, but you're always on the go. So I imagine it would have been different and challenging for you to sit, and reflect back.
It was, luckily in Philippines, it was in lockdown for 8 months. We were in quite a big apartment complex, so we couldn't leave it except to go for food. But I could do a run. It was like 2/3 of a kilometre, do one lap. So I generally do like 12 laps a day, walking and running. So I was never luckily trapped in an apartment. In Vietnam, I had a 4-month lockdown, and Ho Chi Minh completely locked down. You couldn't even go out and get food. But luckily in Hanoi, you could go out. So I would make 1 or 2 trips a day to the supermarket because that's the only time I could get out. And then luckily there was a rooftop where I could do a little bit of exercise too. So where I was staying. So I got pretty lucky. I don't know how I would have coped living in an apartment, that's for sure. In lockdown.
So you were in Vietnam for most of the lockdowns?
8 months in Philippines and 8 months in Vietnam. And then a month in Singapore, 2.5 months in Taiwan, COVID-free, which was great. 2 months in Thailand, 2 months in US before I got here. So a good mix. But about half and half. And so Taiwan and Vietnam, when it wasn't in lockdown, were just highlights because for touring around, no tourists, really don't need to book your accommodation ahead. You can just arrive and work out what you're going to do. So I was very fortunate in that regard too. So I had some really good times during COVID too.
And, so I guess you've been in the Asia area for the last 2 or so years, but Melbourne is where you sort of began. Is that home for you in terms of family origins and things like that?
Correct, yeah. So Preston boy, or Reservoir boy originally, Preston. When not long before Crown opened, I actually moved to across the road from the casino. So it was like 100 metres walk to the car park and then to get into the staff area. So that was the best travel point of view or minimal travel to get to work. And then till 2007. So that's when I started moving around, 2 years in Sydney and just under 2 years in Sydney, then on to Macau.
And so given that my podcast and my, whole thing is all about mindset and performance and things, I'm curious to know a little bit about what that's been like for you, being able to travel and leave your origins and be away from family. You're constantly on the road. You're constantly under stress. I know you do longer hours than any poker player because you don't get knocked out of your tournament. You are there till the end of the. And I saw you at 3 a.m. the other night at the end of this series. Waiting for the thing to finish. So from a mindset point of view, does it challenge you? And in what ways? I'm curious.
It's actually less challenging than an office job, so working on the floor. So sometimes you might get your 15-hour day or 16-hour days, but because you're walking around, you're not stuck on a computer. That makes it go quicker. And on a really busy day, I'll clock up 15,000 steps to 20,000 steps. So especially if it's a setup like Sydney where you've got different areas, it's sort of a wide area between the tables. So it's... Yeah, it's from the point of view... I've just lost my train of thought, sorry.
Just from a mindset, being able to... I mean, you have to perform. You're under pressure, just like we are as poker players. Obviously, your paycheck doesn't change depending on some of your decisions like we do with our game. But for you, let me just reflect on some things I've experienced in my career with like tournament directors and what I've observed. You know, you have a lot of very high stressful situations where you know, you may need to make a decision on a ruling, and you know, there's always someone who comes off second best in that, and they could be angry, they could take out their abuse on you. Like you have to manage emotions of not only your staff but the players, and you have a very calm, cool nature about you, which is one thing I'm very impressed by compared to, you know, all the other tournament directors I've seen around the years. Not to say that they're bad, but you're definitely in the more professional caliber. And I also notice you use humor a lot.
Yes.
So tell us a bit about that and what that's like.
Yeah, that's interesting. So often I use the humour if I've had to not embarrass a player, but say, no, you've done it wrong. You can't do it like this. And it's like, especially in Asia, it's a loss of face, the way you do it. Like when we give a one-hand penalty in Asia, we don't make them step away from the table. We just say, just don't touch the cards, sir. So it helps in that regard. With the sense of humour is then to try and do a little bit of a joke back to let him get over it. Like if somebody gets me angry and in a tournament, I want to get rid of it straight away. So and then go up to the person and just talk to them like normal. So as if we haven't had a situation where it's either been bad for him or he's got upset with me, and just move on from it. So.
And you found that to be a pretty successful strategy long term?
Yeah, long term. So I would, as a negotiator in a business meeting, I wouldn't rank myself highly, but as a tournament director, I just seem to, I guess with the experience, get the situations. Sometimes you get the impossible situation where it's really hard to pick one way or the other. But generally, yeah, I think the manner that I go with the players, like thinking of one of the TDs at a recent event, if you're above the players or speak down on the players, that's not going to help you. You've got to be on their level. So that's why I always like to be as approachable as possible too. If anybody comes up to me, I don't want to be that person who's too busy to speak to anybody. So sometimes I've got to quickly move on to the next player, but I definitely, if I don't want to ignore a person who comes up to me, that's for sure.
Yeah, I love that mentality, because I think that, you know, a lot of poker players have an ego, you know, when they come to the game, because they're, you know, there to compete, and so you should, right? You know, in some sense, you need that to be able to win. That's what being competitive is all about. But they often convolute the relationship of the ego in the game with the ego with the staff. And I've seen the amount of things that people say to dealers. I can't stand that, and I always like stand up for dealers, because, you know, they're humans and they're just working and they're providing us a service. Exactly, it's like, right. You know, they're going to make mistakes, but taking it out on them, especially if it's things to do with like luck or anything, and then blaming dealers. I mean, it's superstition stuff is beyond me. But from your perspective, you know, I do really like that, you know, because being approachable is something that I reckon if I walked around the poker room in Australia and said, do you feel like you could go up and talk to Danny? Everyone would say yes. So you've got that really amazing, approachable nature about you. So you've certainly earned that over the years, I'm sure.
Yeah, practice makes perfect, I guess, in that
it's not the fact that you also go for a beer with some of the players every now and then after too. That probably does help.
The interesting, when you're talking about beers, though, Macau timings were perfect. So 3 o'clock starts, you'd generally be done by 2, 3 in the morning. And then the nightclubs and the bars don't really fire up till after midnight. So you get home by 6, 7, you could still have 8 hours sleep potentially and get to the next tournament. So that was the beauty of it.
Yeah.
But when you do talk about the physical hours and stress, if I'm short on sleep, if I've had a really bad sleep, I sweat more, and there's nothing worse when you're in a suit and walking around and
doing your 15,000 steps, sweating it up, and being under stress and pressure.
That's right, yeah. But once I get a good night's sleep, then I'm fine. Like a 7-hour sleep, say during a tournament, I feel like 100%, you know, and you're ready to do that crazy long day again.
So self-care really is just as prevalent for you than it is for us poker players. And you know, I'm going to publicly state that you and I went on a run the other day, and it was a fantastic run. I mean, you're a very fit guy for the stage of life you're at. We almost got to the 10K mark, but we set out for about 8, and I think probably 95% of people listening wouldn't even be able to run that far. So well done. You're certainly taking care of yourself. And you mentioned that over lockdown, you were able to really step up some of those things. So is that something that you are consciously trying to do now even more than ever? Or how's that for you?
Probably more so. In Macau, I got into the false sense of I go for a run every now and again and feel fine, but was partying probably too much at the same time. So building a bit of a stomach pot. And then one day there is a hilly area in the Colorone area, area of Macau. It's the third island, and went for a hill run with these guys one day, and I couldn't keep up with them. So then I realised, oh my God, I've lost a lot of fitness. I can still run 10 kilometres slow on the flat, but as soon as there's some pressure of a hill or something like that, I realised then I'd lost a lot of fitness. So that's when I started to get back into it. COVID came along. There was a liquor ban in Philippines, so for 4 months. So love a couple of beers, but that I find does put the weight on if you're having a couple of beers a day. That's for sure. And so that kind of got me lost 7-8 kilograms in the Philippines. I've kind of kept it off, and these days my capacity to work and play hard is not as what it used to be. So I can still do the long hours I'm working, but I can't go out afterwards and go partying. So that's actually a good thing health-wise. So I think it's more so realising I can't do the things I used to do in Macau, the long hours and going out with the players as much. And that's naturally meant better health. So because I'm still keeping up the running. So I generally try and get out about 4 or 5 days a week, about 8 to 10 kilometres max. I got one knee that gets a little bit sore if I go above that. But fitness-wise, I'd be up there for... I'd have to go back to my early 20s when I was running seriously, to when I was fitter.
Yeah, that's very impressive. I mean, it's certainly... I mean, I run as well, and I play soccer, as I was telling you the other day. And you know what it does for your mental health and discipline, as well as your physical health, is amazing. And just to slightly touch on a different topic, but talking about weight, I just wanted to make a complaint to the WPT. I've brought something with me that's quite heavy. I just wanted to... I had this in my bag just from the other day. Why are these so heavy? I have speaking of weight, because this is basically added about 30% to my body weight. I'm just going to put this here on the table. I have nowhere else to put it, but right in the shot. Sorry, Danny.
No, that's okay.
Just going to leave that there. So tell me, why are these so heavy?
That's the question for Martin. So so the Star did the side events, and I love the side-on look too on the trophy where you can see the buildings.
Yeah, and we're going to go for a run around those buildings right now after this episode too. So it is very cool. It's a very cool trophy.
Yeah. Last year they did surfboard trophies up on the Gold Coast for WPT Deep Stakes Gold Coast, and it was one of the finalists for the GPI Trophy of the Year. So they do well. So overall, the marketing of the poker tournaments by the Star has just gone up in spades. So it's fantastic.
So what's it like being at WPT? I mean, obviously you've been around at all different organizations and stuff now, like how is this one any different or like how are you finding it?
It's got the Australian flavour with Lynn, the TV anchor, Angelica, the VP of Global Tour Management, myself, and then Ashley too, so Royal Flush Crew. So there's probably only 25 bodies, or maybe when you include the Royal Flush Crew, 30 to 40 bodies. So to have 4 Australians in there is great. So up until this year, it's been not full time. Of course, when I go to an event, it's full time. But I've taken on an additional role this year. So this will be the first year since I've come to WPT that I've gone to a sort of full time role. The PokerStars role when I was in Asia was pretty full on. That's for sure. So it's kind of... It's been good just to, over 3 or 4 years, to step back a little bit and not have crazy hours. And now this is a good year. I've just committed for 1 year with the additional work, and then I'll step back a bit and just sort of what I enjoy the most, like the events. So the Asia Pacific area, I pretty much set up the agreements, and then I'm TD at some of them too. So here I'm kind of in the background, but in Vietnam, Cambodia, I'm the full-on tournament director. So I still enjoy doing that, running the show on the floor.
So you enjoy the most being in the action on the floor, running the show?
Yeah. So still these days, which is great.
Yeah. What is it about that really invigorates you? If that's something you enjoy the most?
I think it's a sense of achievement. Especially when you're getting records like we have been recently. Like there was Cambodia was a great event to go to, a beautiful ballroom set up at Naga World in Phnom Penh. So to go to new places, but I guess just keep myself right up to date too. So if I go to Taiwan, they've got a very good tournament team, so I kind of step back a bit. And the Australian events, I'm not doing everything, so I'm just kind of helping in the background. But I like the Vietnam and the Philippines and the Cambodian events because it's basically keeping fully up to date. So if I'm off the floor, I'm gonna start to lose, I guess, a sense of everything and not always up to date with the rules. So it just keeps me up with everything that's happening.
And speaking of rules, I mean, would it be different in different places you're doing it at? Because I know because I was involved in an incorrect ruling. Well, not an incorrect ruling, but there was an out of bet turn in a hand I was in, and they used the star rules, which is different to the international rule, I believe. And I think it needs to change here. But anyway, that's a different topic. The point is, is it hard for you to have to change in different areas for different rules and that?
Definitely need to be aware. So the out of action rules came up early in the festival. So because some people come up to me and expecting I'm going to make a decision. So it's good for me to know if there are any differences. It's only really Australia. So Philippines is generally almost the same as TDO, and then the other places we just implement the rules ourselves. So as the tournament director, so they don't have a regulatory authority. The problem about Sydney is when I looked up the out of turn rules, I thought, they're a copy of my rules back at Crown from the early 2000s. So they're just a little bit.
You mean they're outdated?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll say it. I know you might get scrutiny for saying it, but I'll say it. Some of those rules are outdated.
Yep.
The out of bet turn needs to definitely change.
Yeah.
I think it's even a cash game thing.
They do it also, right? Yeah.
Well, I think they've used the same rule from a cash game, which is very different because in cash games you're often very deep stacks, so the rule actually does apply. But here, it's different. If someone covers you, then it doesn't change the ruling.
Yeah.
It's, without going into too much detail, it's they need to change it up because it basically means that the person who didn't bet out a turn cannot bluff in the hand because the other person's forced to call your action. But anyway, it's challenging, certainly, and I would imagine for you, you will really have to touch up on those ones, especially in Australia, because I know from playing all over the world that Australia has the worst regulations that they have to jump through 7 different hoops of people who don't even understand poker to change a rule.
Correct.
For poker. It's a bit bizarre, but
Martin's done a good job already in Queensland. So New South Wales is his next focus for.
So the Queensland and New South Wales ones, they have to go through different hoops to get.
Correct. Yeah,
even though they're both the star.
But different regulators.
Wow. Yeah. See, that would be hard, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So tell me, what's over your career, what's been like the toughest challenge you had to overcome?
Toughest challenge? Probably, I guess, getting initially in Macau. So setting up. Originally, we were just it was at the Grand Waldo, so it was a small casino, which is part of Galaxy now. Yeah. Okay, so the first day we opened up, and it was a funny story. 4 Chinese people come in. We were in a side room, so it wasn't sort of on the main floor, so it was difficult to get players there. We had a no smoking policy, and 4 Chinese people walked in. This is back in 2008. 4 Chinese people walked out straight away as soon as they saw that you couldn't smoke in there. So, So I guess you need to adapt to the different areas. At that stage, Grand Lisboa had poker. So for tournaments, we're okay. But to set up, to make the cash game room a success, it was a real challenge. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge because it was kind of, the poker room there was kind of my baby to develop. So I'd say the initial Macau days were probably the biggest challenge. Moving countries, so living in a new country. So, but the staff, there was a lot of stuff at that stage, Filipino staff. So there were people speaking English. The Macanese dealers didn't have much English. So it wasn't too long after that the casino started to cull all the supervisors who were foreigners. So to ensure that the locals would come up into those spots. So So the pit bosses were in it. So it just went slowly up and up to in the end, even high execs sort of were moved out of Macau almost to the detriment of the knowledge of some of those casinos.
Wow.
But,
so how did you survive then? I mean, you would have been one of the foreigners, right? I mean,
but I wasn't employed by the casino. So PokerStars had an arrangement with the casino.
Right.
So that's where that was okay. And I wasn't, how would you say? So I was doing tournaments, but I wasn't an official gaming supervisor or anything like that for the other table games.
So you were sort of untouchable in some sense,
yeah, that's
from
right.
them anyway.
Correct.
And their strict expectations, I suppose.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Did you have to learn any of their languages or anything to really be able to fit in as best you can, or?
It was Cantonese mostly at first, so lots of Hong Kong players, and China at that stage was just starting to get into poker. So Cantonese is the most difficult of the two Chinese languages. It has 7 different tones, whereas Mandarin has 4. I knew the numbers really well, so I could announce the blinds. I could go up and say to the dealer, "Oh, this pot is 50,000." In their language, it's not 60,000. So that numbers get you a long way in poker. Mandarin came, and we had some China events, and I did have some Zoom classes to try and improve my Chinese, but I never got it beyond very basic hellos and the like. And then once we stopped having events in China, it kind of fell away anyway. So you get in countries you can get away in poker with only not much language, local language. Because I guess a lot of poker terms are universal. The English term or saying. So
yeah, like check, bet, fold, call. It's all people know it no matter what language you speak.
That's right. Yeah. But it was language is difficult. If you haven't had a second language from early days, it's difficult to learn, and Chinese languages especially.
Well, yeah, because Chinese. As far as I know, wasn't based off any Latin like English is. So it's not like because I learned a bit of Spanish, and because they're both derived from Latin, it's at least a lot of things you can see and they sort of sound similar. But with Chinese, it's like completely different, right? It's all symbols and all different kinds of sounds.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be hard. I would imagine that even just as a player, when I play with people who don't speak English or well anyway, there's so many times that there's they say something and the bet might be different to what they say, or all sorts of different things like that happen, which open the game up to all sorts of things like angle shooting and that. And look, 98% of the time people aren't trying to angle shoot in anything, but things happen and mistakes happen and you don't know, so you have to follow the ruling.
Yes.
It must be hard for you working in places like Macau, because would that happen a lot where you have those confusions?
There would be confusions too, because in China they go in 10 100s. They don't go thousands, and I remember one stage the China person in his translation got it wrong because of the way they don't go in hundreds and thousands like in English, and then it was kind of his intention was for another amount, and I think we did accept his intention because he got the translation wrong. So,
wow.
But it was China. Chinese was allowed, so they needed to really rely on the dealers and the floor people who could speak Chinese to monitor what's going on. You kind of get a sense, even if you can't understand the language as a TD over time, if something's amiss. So it's definitely walking from Australia where virtually everybody speaks English to another country and Westerners coming in sort of, you're allowing Chinese here. I said, well, this is the language.
This is their country, man. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've played in Macau, but not been there for probably 8 or 9 years. But playing in other countries that are Spanish speaking, or even in where did I go? Monte Carlo, because I think they're allowed to speak French and stuff there. It is different, because especially if two players are just conversing during a hand, and I don't understand them, it is different. It's very different from a player's perspective anyway.
Agree.
Yeah. So, but yeah, look, so your challenges of, you kind of told us a little bit about. I'm curious to know a bit about what's been your greatest success, and do you have anything more that you're looking to still achieve? Because you're in the Poker Hall of Fame here in Australia, and this is the first time I've had someone on the podcast who's in the Hall of Fame. So you're the inaugural Hall of Famer here. You've achieved a lot. You're in the Hall of Fame. You've worked for some of the biggest companies in the world. Do you have anything more you want to achieve, or what's been your greatest achievement?
It's I think looking back on the achievements, it's almost at each spot, like Aussie Millions, of course, and what that stage got to by the time I left in 2007. I did come back in 2008 to assist with the events, so that's, I guess, the automatic first one. Then Macau and a couple of big super high roll events, and then building up the Macau Poker Cup, hitting 1,000 uniques was a really big number in that country. With the WPT, it's been like to bring lots of events into Asia Pacific. That's been great. So it's been, how would you say, it's more not a specific event yet, but just generally bringing the World Poker Tour into Asia. I did go back to PokerStars at the same time, so I was at both WPT and PokerStars for a year and a half. So I was involved with the PSPC, that was an amazing event to be involved in. It was in the Bahamas. January 2019, and I can remember pushing for it to be a freeze out, and I was so glad that it did end up being a freeze out. You had 300 players who won, they called them platinum passes. So some of them they just won a small tournament and the platinum pass was on top of it. Some were like a flip out on day 2 to decide if you made it through to day 2 of the event, you would get a pass. So and other ones were just very small promotions in different countries. So the value was really there, and they ended up getting over 1,000 players. So I was, I definitely wasn't in there from the start with all the planning, but it was great from the structure point of view and the actual tournament point of view to be involved in that and to be at the place. So so that was there, and then there's probably one more thing for WPT. So there'll be announcements soon. So that that I've
no
been
spoilers
involved
here, though.
in. Yeah, so unfortunately no spoilers. But
okay.
And then I think. If that comes through, that'll kind of think, I think that'll be, I've got no other plans other than that one. So other than continuing to doing the regular events in Asia Pacific.
Yeah. Look, a lot of things are coming up for me as you're talking. I'll go through them one at a time. The first one of the things is you mentioned freeze out, and I want to ask you a little bit about this whole transition from, freeze outs to reentries, but let's park that idea for now. The other thing I'm curious about is, when you're looking at all these different events that you're doing, and all the stuff behind the scenes, this is one of the things I wanted you on here for, because I think people don't realize why these events get so big. People just think, oh, poker's booming. Yeah, that's great. And as a player, we want big fields, big prize pools. But it's this sort of work and the marketing and I don't know much about what's going on online now with WPT, but giving out, doing free rolls where there's packages and platinum passes, and this is what creates the action and the hype. And so that's really fascinating to me to hear a little bit about those behind the scenes things. And one thing that and I speak for us all, we should be grateful for the work that you guys do with that. So again, I'll come back to what I said at the start of this. Thank you. I think it's amazing. We wouldn't have these sorts of exciting events where it's all very hyped up without that. So that's really cool. So let's talk about the freeze out stuff. Now, I've been around long enough to know that we didn't have re-entry tournaments when I started 14 years ago, and it was about, I think, 7 or so years ago that they started introducing them. From a player's perspective, this is going to be a tit for tat. I want to see what we can come up with here. I see this, we see this as a way for companies to build big prize pools with lots of turnover. The structures are faster than they used to be for main events, which is fair enough. We get it. You got multiple days and things like that, because you can re-enter. So from your perspective as a tournament director, why do you think that it's changed over time?
I think Jono was actually the first one to bring it in, and we're probably talking 10 years ago. Yeah,
Jono Pittock.
Yeah, Jono Pittock. 12. Yeah. It was a replicharge event at the Aussie Millions.
Replicharge, that's what you used to call it. Yes.
So that's where it came from, and then it came through. From an operator's point of view, a lot of it was just revenue driven. Them wanting to do it. From my personal view, I really like a mix, because if everything's re-entry, the new players got way less chance of winning an event. So so that's the big thing for me. It's great for the prize pool. I mean, it helps with setting guarantees and the like, but in the long run, if you go re-entry for an event, you potentially could go lower than what you would have been as a freeze out, because you lose some players, depending on what that buy-in is. the one thing with this event, which was multiple re-entry, the main event in Sydney, because we were going to alternates on each day, and only to a small, there was only a maximum of 20 alternates on 1A, so it wasn't too much for a wait. By the time we got to 1C, it played like a freeze out, because the player knew if they busted, there was 300 people waiting to get on.
That was definitely going through my mind. I was sitting there thinking, okay, I've got 35 big blinds or 30 big blinds, do I really want to bust? Is there equity in me not taking a high variance spot, knowing that I might have to wait 2 or 3 hours to get back in? Look, for me personally, I was in the main event for 4 entries, and I ended up finishing 90th, and I made a loss of 2,200. So the other question, I suppose, that comes up is, does that factor in with your payout structures, right? Because, I'm in for $6,000, and the min payout was 2.6K. So I would say for a lot of the pros, or not so much just pros, but the regular players, we are in for an average of 3, maybe a bit over 3 entries. So we, as players who play regularly, we do have an advantage of winning these tournaments. Obviously, we're putting more investments in, but that means that the amateurs have a less chance if they're only playing a one-off thing, or if they win a one-off package at their local pub or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's some considerations there, but I don't know if it's good, bad, or neutral. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we need that mix. So if we did in Vietnam, they never knew what a freeze out was. So we had one freeze out tournament last year. It was all locals at the event because the country was locked because of COVID. So it was interesting. So some Asian countries have never seen a freeze out. So whereas Australia's gone from all freeze outs and other countries that have had poker for a long time to some places where it's all re-entries and all multiple re-entries. So I really like to have a mix of freeze outs, one re-entry, multiple re-entry. And multiple re-entry I'm fine with on the high rollers, because generally they're players that have been around. There's not too many brand newies that are jumping in the high rollers. So I've got no problems with that. But for all the other events, I definitely would like to have a mix. And the freeze outs, for me, that's the most appealing, because that's when the lesser players are going to come through. They've got a better chance.
Yes. So that I'm sort of offended when you say that, because my little tournament here I've got my trophy for is a freeze-out event. So you're suggesting that a lesser player wins the freeze-out event more often? What are you trying to say?
So, how would I describe that? So, well, the fact is you only needed, it was with a field of over 400, it's going to be tough. But,
so I guess then... So I suppose I remember the Aussie Millions main event never went re-entry. They really made a point of not doing that.
Correct.
Do you think that was anything to do with trying to keep the integrity of a true poker tournament in there, in one of the best events?
I believe so. I know Jono was under pressure at one stage and he resisted it. So the bean counters from upstairs, to make re-entry more money, and for sure for 1 or 2 years it would have been higher. But then they satellite so many players, like 400 players or something, and those players are going to start to think, why am I, spending all this money trying to satellite into the Aussie Millions when this guy's just going to, re-enter if I bust him. So I think, like the World Series has kept it, but the World Series of Poker Europe is now one re-entry.
For the main event?
For the main event.
10K euros, is it? Wow.
Yeah, so that, So they were talking, the numbers are up, but they were up because of the one re-entry.
Yeah, the unique entries may not be up, just the entries might be up, yeah. Look, I think one re-entry for a main event is good, but there's certainly something about the idea of knocking out someone and them re-entering and then you playing against them and them, having a chance to get you back. I mean, there's something that's not organic about it for me.
Yes.
With like a main event anyway.
100% agree. Yeah. I can live with 2-day ones, 1 entry per day. The EPTs are 1 re-entry at any time, and they allow entry the day before day 2. So a player could turn up for 1B, bust late, and they can enter at the start of day 2 too. So that's another option. But they can also re-enter on the same day, which I don't really like. If you're limiting the entries and it's more than 1 day 1, I'd rather put them, 1 entry per 1A, 1 entry for day 1B.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that this evolutionary part of poker with going to re-entries, do you think that we've hit where it's going to be for a while now, or do you think it's going to evolve again? Do you think anything's going to change about the structures with the re-entries? What do you reckon?
I think it's hit its peak. I'm hoping that more tournaments will be a mix of freeze outs and one re-entry in the future. I don't think the World Series will change from what it is because it's such a massive number.
For the main, you mean?
For the main, yeah.
Well, so even actually their bracelet events, are they...
No, they've brought in quite a few Reentries now into their bracelets. So they've definitely changed on their bracelet events, but just the main. I don't think they'll touch that for a while. You see the big high roller events that are basically all Reentry, and even the pros are encouraging it to be basically a one-day structure with a final table the next day so they can play the next day. So I think the faster structures as you're talking about is almost player-driven for the bigger buy-ins. That's what they're wanting. I think there's a Triton event at the moment. I saw yesterday it was a short deck 50,000. 16 entries, 16 re-entries. So they're not huge numbers, but they're
doubling the prize pool.
That's right.
Yeah, because I suppose, I mean, let's look at this WPT main that just happened. You had 40-minute blinds on day one, and then 60 on day two. And what tends to happen from a player's perspective is 15% of the field get through on day one, rough and ready, right? Maybe 16, 17%. It's quite fast. Mostly people are going to get knocked out. Day two, it's really fast at the first couple of levels because there's a few short stacks around. But then as the 60-minute levels start to catch up, it actually did slow down dramatically. And an average stack was around 40 to 50 big blinds for the most part 50, with the final 100. Even towards like final table, it was very deep. So the back end of it from day two, it tends to really catch up and it becomes a really good structure. It's just this day one thing.
Yeah.
And the thing is that from a player's perspective, my concern here is if you do have a lot of, recreational and amateur players wanting to play, there's a very high chance they're going to have a bad experience and bust out and not make a day two. So making a day two is quite an achievement for a lot of people, even though people I coach, I say, no, that's not an achievement because you haven't won any money.
Yes.
Earning lots of chips and having a good chance on day two, that's an achievement. But for some people, being able to make a day two, they want to put on their social media, hey, I made day two of the main event, and they want to get excited and they get to go and sleep and get excited for day two. So there's a concern there on my behalf, but I don't know what the solution is.
The other thing with a 1K event, if you do say only play down to 25% of the field, fitting them in on day two. So then fitting all the players in on day two.
Yes.
So that's and especially when you're getting a field like in Sydney. So the Deep Stacks brand is getting retired. It's going to be called WPT Prime, and the first one will be in Vietnam.
I saw that. Yeah.
So normally all these same structure, but it's actually going to play to the money on day one. So if you do get through day one, I guess it is an achievement because you've got your cash and the like. So it's not going to be any quicker structure, but it's just going to be a bit longer on day one. It only takes about another level, so it's 10 hours of play. So which is okay. You don't want to go much over 10 hours of play.
Well, I noticed that we have these rules now in Australia for 12 hours play maximum.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't know that until this series, and I was told that.
Yeah, we had to keep that in mind. So, and that's through the inquiries that started with Crown.
Yes.
That's coming through, and that's gone through basically all the casinos. So yeah, a 12-hour limit.
Yeah. That would be really hard to police. I mean, I'm going to admit that I was in day two of the main event. I started at 11:30 a.m. And then I got knocked out and bought into the 5K, and I was playing until I think 12:30. I mean, that's over 12 hours. But I mean, how do you guys police that? I mean, it'd be so impossible. Like.
With poker, it's really difficult because you could argue on poker with the breaks, you were still under the 12 hours. I think at the right time, an application will be made to the government and say, look, these people, they're paid a set fee. So if they're here for the 12, 13 hours, they're not continually going back, because you've only got a limited re-entry period. So
yes,
but that's not going to happen overnight.
Well, I suppose there's an argument that it's not a compulsive behaviour that they're there for that long, which is, I imagine, the reason why we have it to make sure people, can control their, gambling and whatnot.
That's right.
So I suppose if you're in a tournament, it's pretty obvious to say, well, it'll be in the back end of the tournament, and that's just part of the game and the structure of it. And I think from a poker and a performance point of view, this is the real crux of where better players can really shine and show their true skills. Because in the back end of tournaments, I know how freaking exhausting it is, and how tired you are, and how one little blip in your brain and performance can cost you six figures.
Yes.
And that's what can separate the men from the boys, as they say, in poker. So yeah, there's a different aspect to that too.
Yes, yeah, good point.
But yeah, look, I mean, from your perspective, with all the work you're doing behind the scenes, I mean, it's been really interesting having this discussion with you because, yeah, I think about a lot of these things and I hear players talking, but this is your job.
Yes. Yeah.
So it must be challenging to find the middle ground to keep everyone happy, the players and the organisations.
Definitely is, yeah. And then with the casinos in Australia too, like you need to time the tournaments that are right. I mean, it ended up being because the day 1B, day 1C, and then going into the 3 events on the Sunday where we had the PLO 660 and the 5K challenge, they were really filling up the tables. But from the casino point of view, it's a great success. So hopefully next time there'll be more tables too, and maybe even a separate cash game area. So it keeps everybody happy. So,
yeah, look, it
was a tough run for the cash game players for 2 or 3 days.
Look, cash game players get 24/7 around the clock. I know they want more action when the tournaments are in town, but I'm sorry, I'm a tournament player and I'm going to defend tournaments. We get the field here in these 1 week periods.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Well, look, thanks for being on here.
Pleasure, Brendan.
What's next for you as we finish up here?
So back to Philippines for the first time in 18 months, May 10. About a week there, then on to Vietnam. So May 19 to 30. So Hanoi, which great spot, not far from Ha Long Bay, which is a World Heritage listed. Beautiful area for 2-3 night cruises, overnight cruises.
I went, yes. It's where one of the King Kongs was filmed, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
it's
right.
cool. It's really, really nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I love the food there and very affordable place. So I actually broke a tooth a couple of days ago, and there's a dentist I go to in Nha Trang, which is just you'll pay for your trip by doing your dental work.
Yeah, but it's so much cheaper than here in Australia to get your dental work done.
That's right. Yeah, and then after Vietnam, Gold Coast, so June 9 to 20. It's basically getting announced any minute, and then today or tomorrow. So will that be a WPT Deep Prime.
Or Prime?
WPT Prime.
What is the Prime representing? Is it
the new brand? And the idea is it's not main tour. It has so much more features of what the main tour. The action clock comes in play on day 2.
Like shot clock, you mean?
Shot clock, yeah.
Wow, okay. So main event,
action clock, yeah.
Main event shot clock will be in play on day 2.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow, that's going to change things.
Yeah. Yeah, and then
cool.
September has main tour, and which also has the shot clock. Speaking of shot clocks, Vietnam in Hanoi, the club Crown Poker Club, every tournament has a shot clock. When we got to the main event last year, we brought it in one table off the money, which is what they normally do. So players were saying, "How come there's no shot clock?" They were so used to it, and so it was interesting. So every tournament is a shot clock, and then maybe that's the direction of tournaments in the future. So
well, I mean, having a shot clock, just to quickly put in before we finish up, that would increase the amount of hands you're going to get per blind level. So that would actually change things. That'll change if you put a shot clock in on day 1, for example, it will change your percentage, not by much, of how many people you have left in, I think.
Yes.
Because if you have more hands in a blind level, there's more chance people are going to bust, I think. So
correct.
You'll, rather than 16 or 17% left in the main event, it might be like less. It might be 14%. Maybe that changes much. Maybe it doesn't at all. I don't know. Like, it certainly will change something. I like the idea of a shot clock.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And then I think Crown at one stage even had a shot clock on a smaller game, cash game too. So I think they slightly reduced the rate, but they had a shot clock. So there's some ideas, but definitely Taiwan have it for they call their daily deep stack. They have a shot clock, and I think it's a great idea just to get players, for players that don't want to have this on a $200 tournament, $100 tournament, somebody tanking for 2 minutes.
Well, that's what happened in my event, my last event here. So it was a 20-minute blind level thing. It was supposed to be a turbo at the end of it, right? That's what we want at the end of a long series. No one wants to play long levels. Yes. But, there was a few times where there was a few players who were tanking for even 3 minutes to make a decision. That's a long time to tank on one decision, and it was only pre-flop. So then there was still the flop turn and river to worry about.
Oh yeah.
So I'm all for shot clocks, and I'm excited to see the introduction of them in the WPT Prime in June. But again, look, we'll leave it there for today. But thanks again for being here. It's really cool. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of that. So now you're going to drag me out to the Opera House and back when I'm going to go on another run. Do you think we're going to hit 10K today?
We'll do the 10K. Yeah.
right.
We won't go it as tough as I went out too hard last time.
Too hard, too early, yeah.
Yes.
All right, thanks, Danny.
Pleasure.
Best of luck on the rest of your journey and your career.
Okay, and see you back in Australia in June or September.
See you then.
Okay.
Thanks, Danny.
Bye.